Welcome to Child's Gallery, the virtual artist talk with Carol Wax, as she discusses her print exhibition, Extraordinary Objects, on view in our print department through May 24th. My name is Richard Baiano. I'm president of Child's Gallery. We're open Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we are in a webinar format, and so there will be a question and answer session after the artist talk. So please feel free to submit questions via the chat feature during the presentation. So it's not often that we can say an artist has literally wrote the book on her technique, but she has. And Carol Wax has wrote the book, The Mezzotint History and Technique, and that is sort of what is displayed in the show. Her masterful mezzotint engravings depict the ordinary and the extraordinary using dramatic lighting effects, exaggerated perspectives, and a dose of wit. She transforms commonplace objects into astonishing icons, cleverly revealing the anima in the inanimate. I am going to now turn the talk over to our curatorial assistant, Alex Davis.
Hi there. My name's Alex Davis, and I'm very, very honored and excited to be here and to be facilitating this talk with Carol. I think I'm like the perfect unperfect person to do this because I'm not a printmaker and I'm new to prints and everything is like exciting and shiny to me. So I'm really excited to learn alongside everyone watching this webinar, because mezzotint is really an underappreciated and often underdiscussed and undertaught form of printmaking. So we can all be novices together as we learn from Carol. So I'm just going to click through the installation photos. This show is currently happening in our print department, which is on the second floor of our location at 168 Newbury Street. And it allows us to show things like a dense amount of material, which is what I love about our upstairs. And we get to show it alongside our collection of other prints and other material. And something that I love about Child's Gallery is that all of our work, the contemporary work that we bring in from artists like Carol, is always able to be contextualized and referenced within our collection and inventory of historic material. So as Richard said, Carol literally wrote the book, The Mezzotint History and Technique, now in its second edition. And we also have that book here for sale, along with some book plates to squeeze in there for you that Carol was kind enough to sign for us. So Carol, thank you so much for joining us. I quickly clicked through those installation shots. So if you want to go back, we can, but I know we have a whole presentation planned of some more detailed shots of the work.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for the show, presenting everything so nicely. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And congratulations on the second edition. What changed between the first edition and second edition?
Oh, I rewrote the entire second half of the book, the entire technical half of the book.
Wow.
Dated it, I revised it, I clarified, because after 30 years of teaching, you realize where people were confused. And I think it's clearer. There's more illustrations. There's a lot of new artists' work in the book. And then in the technical half, there were a few things I needed to update, a few things to clarify, and a few more reproductions. But it's the whole technical half is completely torn apart and redone.
That's
so
exciting.
I'm quite proud of it. Yeah, it took a while, but you know, it was worth it. I'd wanted to do it for so long. So
wonderful. So can you tell me what we're looking, as you mentioned the technical side of things, can you tell me a little bit about what we're looking at here on this slide?
Well, mezzotint is the process is it inherently exaggerates chiaroscuro, you know, your relative tonal values or contrast. And so that because I so much of my artistic development was through the medium of mezzotint, it really helped me develop a certain direction in my art. And what you're looking at here is in the beginning, it was so integral to me, mezzotint, that I had no patience for doing preparatory sketches. So the illustration on the far left was my pencil attempt at doing this sewing machine sketch. And then I said, well, maybe easier if I took black construction paper and white pencil and tried to do it that way. And I just had no patience. And finally I said, look, it's so clear in my mind, just going to rock this plate and I'm going to transfer a few basic outlines to the plate. And then little by little, I would transfer some details or draw the details on the plate and scrape and burnish from there. So for me, this sewing machine is not so much about the machine and, you know, it's nostalgia or anything like that. It's sort of about the light and how the light is sort of framed by this sewing machine.
Yeah.
And so my work very, very early on became about how light and shadow affect how we perceive form and volume and all that, all those clinical things. And then the more symbolic aspects of the work evolved over time.
Yeah.
So this was sort of how I began working in the beginning. And now I often will work from images done in other mediums and say, well, maybe this would make a good print, or maybe I'll make a sketch to be a print as a dress rehearsal kind of thing. But, you know, there's still times I have no patience for the sketch, and there's still, you know, and I'll just start on the copper. Or there's still times that, you know, I'll say, okay, I did this oil painting or this gouache painting or drawing, and I'll translate it into mezzotint. And of course, every time you work in a different medium, something changes, it evolves, it becomes about something else. So it's a very interesting process to watch yourself be your own translator onto another medium.
Yeah, because this show is all your mezzotints.
Yes.
But you have other practices. You're a painter. You work in other mediums as well. I know you were telling us yesterday that there are murals. Every wall in your house has some
not
sort
every
of
wall yet, because my boyfriend has restrained me, but and it requires ladders. So but you know, yeah, it was a great learning experience how to use acrylics. I just used my walls as canvases, and I do these big murals of the Hudson Valley and, you know, birds. You can see a little bit of the up here, there's like a 14 by 10-inch mural of all the birds that are around here that I feed. So I live with them.
It's incredible. So looking through something I find very exciting. I mean, I find many things exciting about this show, but we have work spanning almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So one Singer 5 was from 1985, and we have work more recent than that. But here are 3 examples where I really think these are perfect examples of the way you're playing with light and shadow.
Well, I mean, Singer 5 was interesting because I'd been in a car accident in 1984. And so I couldn't really work for a while. My neck got all messed up. So I had won all this paper in a competition. And so I thought, well, I'll just, you know, tear it into quarters and do, you know, tons and tons of sketches. And so I did this whole series of just parts of the sewing machine, but they were just floating in space with no shadows, no nothing. And Singer 5 was based on one of those drawings. But when it came time to make the actual print, I put the shadow in, and I had to somehow, because of the plate edge, not let it float. Just it was framed in a way that I had to work with that space. So and so there were several of my images were based on those. And now I think, with all my experience and all that, I think I would have just had a big white copper plate and maybe had them float the way they were in the drawings. But I can still do that because there's a lot of them, you know. I do revisit things that I've worked on, and then maybe like with my print, the Remington noiseless typewriter, that was 1986. By the time I did Remington Return, same typewriter, totally different approach. So it's interesting. I will revisit a model, but the subject changes. So one is about light, one is about form, you know, so repeated patterns. And so it's yeah, I do work through these things
Yeah.
a lot.
I'd love to get to one of the typewriters.
Okay.
Well, these are well, we obviously need to pause here. I love something that really comes up for me in this show is the theme of technology and these old style projectors and the kind of timelessness of these machines. The other thing I love about the projector as a subject is it has light coming out from the inside, right? Where most often we think of shadows being created from, light being put onto an object, but in this projector, you get that beautiful light coming out of the object.
Yeah, that was actually a slide projector and an old slide projector. And I had to make up slides that would be readable on the film. And so I did sort of like a little travelogue. But it's interesting that the shapes of the shadows actually kind of look like the dramatic masks, happy and sad. And so there is, a sort of hidden within it hints of someone's personality or some connection to theater or movies. And then photorealism, that was really more about the patterns, overlaying patterns over patterns that modulate to create the illusion of animation. Because what is film? It's still life images just going by very quickly with light. And so you can animate things that are inanimate using these repeated patterns that modulate and layer over. And this was my father's movie camera that he would torture us with when we were kids, like smile, dance for the thing. And it just like, no, don't dance like that, don't smile like that. It was such torture. I'm still scared of cameras, but it served the purpose here.
Yeah, and so did you have the real camera in studio with you, or were you?
Oh yeah, I work from these from these objects in my studio, and I isolate them in space, so you really don't know where these are oriented. And then I have tensor lights, and I will shoot project light onto them. These very concentrated lights, maybe sometimes 1, 2, or 3, and so things layer up. And I work from life because my sense of perspective is so weird that I could never capture it with a camera. Sometimes I'll take, with my phone, I'll take a little snapshot for reference, like, when I was doing the prints of my dog wrapped in fabric. She wasn't going to hold still for, 72 hours, however long it would have taken to draw it. So, I'll just take a little reference thing, but a lot of this is also my imagination,
Right.
so it's all up here.
And more beautiful shadow examples. And so like I said, I know very little about printmaking, but I'm learning. So is mezzotint an additive process or a reductive process, something else?
Yeah, it's mainly reductive or deductive. I never know which to call it. So it's similar to the way of drawing, where you take a white piece of paper, cover with charcoal so it's all black, and then take a kneaded eraser and erase out the image. But in mezzotint, you have a copper plate that would print white, and you roughen it all over with a tool called a mezzotint rocker, which is a serrated curved blade, lots of little teeth on it, anywhere from 25 to 150 teeth to inch. And you literally rock it over the plate. And as you do that, you prick up little burrs. And so if you rock in about anywhere from 24 to 36 directions, keeping your strokes very close together as it goes across the plate, you end up with a black field of burrs. It would be print black if you put the ink on it. And wherever you want your image, you have to erase or remove the burrs in increments. So you do that either by shaving them down with a scraper, where you're actually removing, you can hear I'm removing those burrs, or using polishing tools like a burnisher and squashing and polishing the burrs. And so everything you do by how the plate reflects light. The more it reflects, the lighter the tone. Where you want white, you remove it. You remove all of the ground, and basically you have to judge by reflections, and different reflections reflect differently. So how to read those reflections, you don't have to prove so much.
Wow.
It becomes, and of course you're working in reverse. So which is very interesting, because when I began this party line print, there were 3 plates, and I rocked all 3, and then I realized that I had forgotten to reverse one of them. And
Okay.
so then I had to start over. I had a fourth plate, thank God. But it happens every once in a while.
Of course. Wow. And I know a word, and we talked about this yesterday, but a word I often hear used to describe mezzotints is velvety. And
Mhm.
that the tones that you're able to achieve with this specific kind of printmaking, because of the rocking, is it has this velvety texture to them.
Yeah, but it was the first form of printmaking where you could get continual tones. It's not like a half tone where, ratio of black dots to white dots. And so it became very quickly used for reproductive purposes to reproduce paintings. You could replicate brush strokes. You could, you could make beautiful mezzotints of people wearing velvet robes or satin or armors and stuff. And so you can get a lot of different textures and lighting effects with mezzotint. And so, for centuries, it was used to reproduce paintings, and then photography was invented, lithography was invented, the apprentice system ended, and so who's going to rock your plates? So, it fell by the wayside. And then Yozo Hamaguchi and Mario Avati kind of revived it in the 50s and 60s, and people got interested in using it for contemporary art. And so when I began working, there wasn't much information, and I discovered a whole lot of ways around problems, and that's when I decided to write the book. And so there was a wealth of information I discovered that was just lost for centuries. So
Ah, perfect. So the fans, another interesting example of technology, in my opinion. And could you talk a little bit about the process of getting other colors besides black and white and gray?
well,
Into-
this fancy was done with two plates, and so there's a black key plate, and then there is another plate that had sort of a brownish ochre color on it. And then when you print them in registration, you get all kinds of crazy subtle variations. And I like to keep it very minimal, like the old-fashioned chiaroscuro kind of lighting, like you would see on old woodcuts.
Mm.
But the fan, though, is very magical to me because there's this moment where you turn on a fan and the blades start to whir around, and as they do it, they become invisible. And so it really is like magic. And then when it, of course, slows down, they reappear as if from nothing. And so this was a fan, the fancy that was, I don't know what grandmother or who had it in my family, but I found it in the basement of my parents' house, and used it for several prints and drawings and paintings. It broke eventually, but the Hunter Air fan, that one I saw on a stoop. There was a stoop sale in Tribeca, and I ran out and I got that fan for $5, and I said, I don't care if it works. I just want to paint it. So,
Yes.
but engrave it. I've done it as a pastel. I've done it as a oil painting, and this is the mezzotint. And again, every time it changes medium, the focus changes. Whereas, in the other two mediums, it's kind of flat. This one, I emphasize the textural effects of burnishing patterns in the background to give that idea very subtly of the whirring, the rotation.
Yeah, I feel the movement in it, and to see you even just kind of not mock, but like to see the rocking, the physicality of the technique, I think is so present in the product and the object.
It is. It's like carving. It's very
Yeah,
sculptural, and each mezzotint plate is like a bas-relief sculpture, in that here's your plate level, and then you're raising a burr, but there's also a little bit of pit where the burr comes from. So you have a ground that's about like this, and so where you want to take away the ground, it lowers it, and then where you leave it, it's black, and so it's like a topographical map
yeah.
with highs and lows. And you can actually, when you run your hand over this Hunter's Affair plate, you can feel the white indentations where I've taken away the ground.
It's amazing.
It's very, it's like if you were blind, you could still figure it out that that was a fan.
That's
touching it.
that's really neat. This one, I think this is my favorite, especially after hearing you talk about it yesterday. There's
It's
so
one
much
of
going.
my favorite too. Steve Gerberick is this kinetic sculptor that person that I know, and he gets all these crazy old machines for his kinetic sculptures. And so he had this old movie projector, and he had two of them. They were frozen. You can't move the gears. And so sort of like the object is frozen in time. And so he gave me one. I came home from a trip somewhere, and there it was on my front step. And I love it because, first of all, it's very Walter Murch. Walter Murch was a artist who did, crazy stuff like this, carburetors floating in space and things. And I love his work. So you can see that influence there. But also, it reminds me of the fruit and flower pieces by Richard Earlham engraved after Jan van Huysum. And they had symbolic meaning to the Dutch 17th century Dutch community. They knew that certain flowers only bloom certain times a year, but they're all in this bouquet. And so it really wasn't about the flowers. It was about the transient nature of life, of beauty. And this then became for me an icon of representing how technology also is transient. This was once a really studly state-of-the-art machine. Now no one knows what it is and or how it works. And that gives it a certain beauty, and it's beautifully designed.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I love thinking of this as a bouquet of gears.
It is. I mean, that's all
Yeah.
I think of when I was engraving this. And I've done it also as a pencil drawing, two pencil drawings of it, oil paintings, pastels. It's a fascinating subject for me. But the
Yeah.
gears are a pain in the ass to do. Sorry, pain to do because they have all those little tiny little cog things, and so
Oh,
it's hard to do.
yeah, I can't imagine. Wow. And beautiful. We're hitting some of them, the typewriters we were talking about earlier.
Well, this is a adding machine.
Oh, it's not a typewriter, an adding
Right.
machine. Okay,
And
cool.
I found it on the street. And so I took it home, of course. And they had like sort of army green metal sheathing all around it. And I said, well, what's underneath there? So I unscrewed the little sheathing, and there was all these beautifully designed, mechanical things. And these were never meant to be seen, but yet, because they're supposed to be hidden under the metal. And yet there they are, and they flow. And I thought, well, I'll take some, adding paper, and I'll put it in, and I'll flow some more, and became sort of like a Mobius strip almost. And so, ad infinitum seemed to be, suitable title
It's a,
for it.
it's a great title for it. I can't believe someone would just, but I'm like you. When I walk by anything on the street and I bring it home to my partner and I'm like, look what I found. And he was like, trash. You found someone else's trash. And it's no, it's gonna be something.
No, it's a gift. It's a gift. It's
A
not trash.
gift from the streets of New York.
It's left there for you.
Fully. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine throwing something out like that. I love this piece as well.
Well, this
Um,
began as a doodle, just a doodle where I just made a calligraphic line, and then I added the spools. And then when it came time to develop it as a mezzotint, I got carried away, I admit. But it just the fact that it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. It reminded me of film. And then in thinking, well, what image will I put on this film? Something that I can, render in such small detail. And so I looked at the Modern Times movie, Charlie Chaplin, and he has that wonderful skatings episode in it where he's skating around, and he really did that himself. And so I put that in there. That was inspired by that. And so that's how that came about. And cycloids, of course, are these, sort of looping forms, and celluloid is film. So makes it.
yeah. Yeah. I mean the transparency of the celluloid and the shadow work and the light. I can in this you talk about, these aren't literal, they're through your perspective. And I think this is a great example of the way that the shadows and the celluloid it dances. And I see your perspective very clearly in this piece.
It's kind of like Jackson Pollock drip things where he's just looping things around. So I think it's my most Jackson Pollock type image.
It's a really cool way to describe it. A destroyed piano.
Well, okay,
Not
so
destroyed.
I can, well, it sort of. I cannot play the piano. I can play anything on the flute, but I cannot play the piano. And so, but I had this idea to do these keys for a very long time. And then one of my neighbors, his family owned the local piano factory, piano repair place. So I said, yeah, do you have old keyboards ever that you're trying to get rid of? And he said, oh, sure, I'll bring them over. And so I had all these things to work from. And so this came about. And then, of course, because it's all, mixed up and, I like things that zoom in and out. So that's mostly what it's about. And, but, because it's kind of like an angry piece in some ways, because it's so jumbled. I ended up calling it the ill-tempered clavier as a sort of a pun on J.S. Bach's the well-tempered clavier. So that's sort of how that came about, and it's done with 2 plates.
Okay. And you, as you just mentioned, you're a flautist, and you went to conservatory to study the flute. And could you talk a little bit about how your relationship to music and your training in music connects to your arts practice?
Well, I mean, all my education is in music. I'm untrained as an artist. But I feel like everything that I learned in music can be applied to composition, visual composition.
Mhm.
So you have, for example, in this piece, the ill-tempered clavier, you have a motif, and it modulates, you can invert it, reverse it, mirror image. You can do all kinds of things with it, the same way Bach would take a motif and play around with it, in the Art of the Fugue and the Goldberg variations. I mean, it's like, okay, put me on a desert island with the Goldberg variations, I'm happy. And so for me, there is a strong correlation in how I think about art and composition, balance, form, overall arching themes, and details. So and I think of it in those terms, as I'm working on something, what would Bach do, or Brahms? So,
Right.
Mozart. So yeah, I mean, I think I had a good art education in music school, and I played professionally for years. And one day I woke up, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And the mezzotint was there and took over. So
Well,
have it.
it's incredible. We're all
So
press
some of
release.
my work has hidden political things. This is one of my more overt political pieces. But I did this thing with all these typewriters, and the ribbon is, zooming in and out, obviously exaggerated.
Mm.
But I was trying to think what I could write on the typewriters on the ribbons. And it was actually my boyfriend who came up with "Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party," which was an old typing exercise. And so this was done right after somebody was elected that maybe I don't like.
Mhm.
I detest. And so this was inspired by all of that. And I do have all these typewriters, I have many typewriters. I have too many typewriters. So
No, it's yeah, I think it's definitely political, but it's also very timely for us to remember the importance of the press. When I think of a typewriter, I think of, I don't know, yeah, I think of typing away. And I know there's another piece about that is a little, now I'm jumping ahead here. Inside Scoop also has this energy of journalism attached to it.
I'm a news junkie.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, they're again, these machines have the imprint of their they're makers, and it's almost like we couldn't make machines in the past that did not reflect something of our humanity, because, you know, they were extensions of our body,
Yeah.
whereas now machines are extensions of our minds.
Mm.
And so typeface, for example, I mean, I see it's a Cheshire cat, you know, the two arched eyebrows and the crazy grin and the crazy looping, you know, ribbons and stuff, of course, all made up. And so, you know, that to me is, I look at that and all I see is a Cheshire cat. And so typeface, of course, is a pun on, you know, the type that you would use, and has a
Right.
typeface, has a face. But inside scoop, a friend of mine, Anna Held Audette, had a neighbor throwing this out, and she rescued it and gave it to me. And the minute she presented it to me, I knew there was a little door, because you still had to make, you know, adjustments or, you know, repairs. So there were all these little hidden doors at a certain point when the mechanisms were being encased. So I immediately opened it, and there was this grin. And so I knew I just had to do this little print of it. It's like, I like little doors, little Alice in Wonderland scenes, and Fabergé eggs where you look in and there's a whole landscape inside this tiny little egg. So things like that I do like.
Yeah, hidden, let me go back to the sewing ones. Hidden purposes, hidden stories behind things.
Yeah,
Uh, so what, which is one of the more recent works that or the most recent work I believe we have on the show.
it's my most recent print.
Yeah, it's really, I'm a fiber artist. I love to knit and sew and do all those things. So this has kind of a surreal quality to it.
A lot of my work is very surreal,
Mm.
especially the paintings. They get kind of wacky. But this started out as a gouache painting. And then I said, well, I think this could make a good print. And I made a lot of adjustments in, you know, translating it. Originally, the pattern making wheel roulette like implement there was just a tiny little black rubber roller, like, you know,
Mhm.
like a brayer. And so, you know, there were things I changed. And so there's two plates, and there's some selective wiping, so that, say, the handle on that roulette-like machine, I can wipe that individually to get a slightly different brown. And so I, you know, I have fun with it. To me, I'm obsessed with these model hands that students use to learn how to draw hands. And I have a couple of them, and they're in almost everything I've done in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, it just, there's something about them that's creepy, but still mechanical, but still human. And I'm just obsessed with them.
Yeah,
And
there.
my boyfriend's sister, Vicky Zeff, she is the greatest clothesline person in the world. Her clotheslines are works of art. And so this was partially inspired by her clotheslines, because it's just amazing, the light that comes through her fabrics and things. So. And I
I
love stripes, so I did that with stripes.
I grew up with a clothesline, and it was one of the chores I was always happy to do. And I don't know, maybe it was a very like aesthetically pleasing thing to do, to watch the light and the wind and the fabric. And but I remember it was the one chore that I was like, I want to do that.
Huh.
It was
And that's all lost. I mean, remember New York City, they used to have, you know, strings of between the apartment buildings, clotheslines, and those were the days.
yeah. Yeah, and we all should be hang drying our clothes as much as we can. Dryers use a lot of energy.
They do.
Uh, and here we have another. Well, this one is directly called a fugue, Handel's fugue.
Well, this is, I took an old proof of ad infinitum, the adding machine with the paper, and I cut it into 1-inch strips. And then I wove the strips. You know how when you're a little kid, and I still do this, you know, you have those little looms and you weave pot holders. Every time
Yeah.
I get stressed, I do it. So I have tons of them. And excuse me, my phone. Anyway, so I wove the strips into these patterns, and then I based this print on the weaving. So I did make changes, but it was kind of a fun thing to do. A lot of times people look at my work and they think they know what it's about. Because they have an idea in their head. I know what a typewriter looks like, therefore I know what this is about. But it's not about that. And so if you take the parts of a machine, the way I see the whole machine, it still to me reads as something very interesting. You still see depth, you still see patterns and all that, but it's just not identifiable readily. And with Mechanical Nightingale, I took Machina and I did the same thing. That actually preceded Handel's Fugue. And I wove them, leaving, more of the box kind of thing where, I selected fewer strips. And as it started to come together, I noticed that certain elements reminded me of a bird. And so I added, a crown, a crest, to the handle, and feathers on the right side, and a chicken leg kind of thing. The whole So to me, it also, the idea of the Mechanical Nightingale, if you remember the old, I think it was Hans Christian Andersen or whoever did the fairy tale, about this Chinese emperor who was so in love with this, nightingale, the song of the nightingale, and then someone gives him a mechanical nightingale, and the real nightingale is so heartbroken that the emperor prefers this machine, that he flies off and he starts to die in the forest or something. But then the machine breaks. And the emperor misses his old friend, the real nightingale, and he comes back and blah, blah, blah. So it's sort of that, like sort of recalls that tale as a cautionary kind of like, don't fall in love with technology because it's not going to love you back.
It's
You know?
it will not love you back.
Right.
That's so true. We did take a look at these. Mr. Miscommunication. So rotary phones are something, another thing that we see a handful of times in your work. Do you have folks in your life that are just like, Carol, I found a rotary phone. I'm dropping it off on your porch. Do people
Yeah, stuff like that does happen. In fact, my newest plate, which is right now being steel faced down in Brooklyn, also is a phone that there was a tag sale that I don't know how many years these people were hoarding. It was, the house stank, but I found this old rotary phone and I just had to have it. It was $1. And so that's actually, another telephone print that's going to be coming out soon. But this one, again, it's like, we live in a society where we are constantly communicating with each other. We have our phones, we have our all these devices hanging off our bodies and hidden away or wherever, it's like everybody's talking, but who's listening? It's the communication is not much better. I mean, I liken it to writing also. Back in the day, you would write, you'd have to chisel something into stone. So you really had to know what you were going to say. And then, there was, papyrus and, ink of some sort. And then there was actually paper, and you would have a quill. And again, paper was expensive, and, you had to write with this, thing you had to keep dipping in and have the right feather and cut it right. And so you still, like, Thomas Jefferson writing the preamble to the Constitution or whatever, he really had to know what he wanted to say.
Right.
And then came typewriter, fountain pens, and then ballpoint pens and typewriters, and then computers, and the level of writing got worse and worse. I mean, I actually, when I was teaching art, was teaching my students how to write. And so I find it so interesting that with greater technology, there seems to be less thought behind what comes out. We expect the machines to do it for us. AI is going to be a trip.
Totally. And that's what you're saying. I said this to you yesterday, but I can see the form of mezzotint and the form of printmaking being integral to the content of the work that you make. So hearing you say all that, the fact that you choose to make these through the process of mezzotint is
again, mezzotint inherently exaggerates your relative tone of values and it's very dramatic lighting.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that film noirish kind of feel to it adds a mystery or creepiness or some kind of seriousness. And so, I think that it's part of a player in the whole play.
Yeah,
It's like shadow and light are performers and tell the story.
absolutely. Well, I want to again remind folks or invite folks to jump in the chat or jump into the Q&A if they have any questions for Carol, or else I'll just keep talking because I
This last image is done as a mezzotint, but the ground, instead of being rocked, I took a dry point needle and scored the plate in, I think, 4 to 6 directions, whatever it was, which is another way to do mezzotint. And so you see the linear pattern merge as you scrape and burnish back. And this was done as a challenge from the Boston printmakers to pick an artist and you know, make a work that relates to one of his prints or her prints. And so I chose this a print by Hamaguchi that uses the same technique. So this is really a Waxaguchi kind of image here.
beautiful. Uh, are there other artists that you feel are foundational to your practice, or
This
influence
sort
you?
of inspired me.
Yeah, inspire you, influence you, that
Oh
excite
God.
you, even if.
Walter Murch, Thomas Hart Benton, Diego Rivera, Artemisia Gentileschi, and Caravaggio, big influences. Philip Pearlstein was a big influence on my life and on my art. And just so many, Arthur Dove. So yeah, there's so many. Louise Nevelson. I mean, I
Mhm.
could go on and on. I mean, you can't create art in a vacuum. So I mean, even in high school, I would go to the library and there was a book on Thomas Hart Benton and there was a book on Goya. And so very early on, I was, you know, fascinated. And from the time I could walk, my parents took me to the Met. So I was, and it wasn't, you know, I was a weird kid. I loved it. You know, I thought of those, you know, painting people being beheaded and everything. Oh, that's really great. So
That's so wonderful. Well, we're getting some affirmations in the chat, not necessarily questions, but people saying that beautiful work. And then another printmaker that we work with named Bill Evertston. It
oh,
just
he's great.
Bill's wonderful. Bill
Yes.
just wants you to know that he's enjoying his second edition copy of the book.
Oh, good.
We have another great question uh, coming from an artist, a fellow artist. Do you find your process to lean in? Do you find your process being meditative? And if so, does your brain go off in many different directions? Do you think about your future work or inspiration and concepts? Do you listen to music while you work? Kind of what's physically, somatically going on while you're working?
Well, the process of rocking the plate can be tedious, can be very time consuming, but it also gives me a chance to really think about what it is I want to do. And many times when I had this concept of this is what I want to do, then I'm rocking, I go, you know, make it even more interesting. And so that gives me that time that, you know, it's not instant. So it's not so much meditative as it is you know, introspective and really coming to terms with what I'm doing. Do I start to get into the rhythm of rocking? I start almost invariably with either the Brahms Violin Concerto. The first movement subdivides perfectly for the rhythm I need, or Chris Smithers' Happier Blue. So it depends if I'm feeling classical or folky.
Okay.
And so you know, that is kind of like a ritual when I start a new plate. And but you know, I used to watch movies while doing this. I would have a little TV on, you know, when you had antennas and stuff. And so, you know, it's I can have music on, or sometimes I just sit in silence, or the radio, you know, NPR, you know, hear what's happening on Fresh
Right.
Air. So, you know, it varies. There are times where I look at a print, and all I can think of was, oh yeah, what's that Alan Alda movie while doing that, that kind of thing.
Develop the association.
Yeah, no one else can
Exactly.
see it, but
Yeah.
so yeah, it varies, and a lot of times I just really do like to sit in silence these days.
Yeah.
Well, except for the tinnitus, I like quiet.
I just got another question, and you talked a little bit about your use of color, but you really do often you do have not a minimal color palette, but you're very specific. If I everybody don't freak out, I'm gonna back up, try not to make people seasick. If you So What has some beautiful colors, but they seem to be very specific in what you're choosing to use.
Yeah, well, one of the great things about mezzotint is because you have rockers that can have anywhere from 25 up to 150 teeth per inch, you can vary the intensity of the color by what ground you use. And
Mhm.
so my use of color, if you have the key plate is the plate that has most of the image information. But if you have a strong key plate, you can be very free with the colors underneath. And so when I work in color, very often, you look at the color plate and you go, what is that? And like the print on the cover of the book, the Oliver, you look at the color plates on that and you really don't know what you're looking at. And so for me, in some ways, color can be very freeing. And it's I like to make the comparison again to music. If you're working in black and white, it's like a Beethoven string quartet.
Mm.
Every note has to be there. And if the second violin plays a B instead of a B flat, everybody cringes. It's exposed. Everything's got to be working in concert. But if you're playing, I don't know, Mahler or something, and the second violin is 3 rows back, makes a B instead of a B flat, the French horn's going to take care of it. It's just all very free, very, it's not a big deal. And so for me, color is like, Brahms or Mahler, and it comes back to Bach and Mozart for the black and white.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful image. Thank you. There's a great question about someone's asking if you could talk more about your tools and how you get such tiny details in your plates.
The details, they're there, but it's kind of an illusion how much I leave so much out. If you just have enough detail to convince someone, that's all you need. And so yeah, if you have an image with a lot of detail, you might want to use a finer gauge rocker, so it's not so hard to dig out the white areas. I have a variety of tools, lots of different kinds of burnishers and scrapers. My cousin Joni, her husband, collects rocks. He's a rock hound, and he polishes these beautiful agates and sends them to me for Christmas. I'm like, oh my God, these make the best burnishers. And so, there's lots of tools you can use, little ball burnishers. You can control a lot of what you're doing using templates, which they don't really sell so much anymore because everyone does all their graphic design work on computers. But, the old-fashioned green templates with circles and French curves and stuff. So, there are tricks for retaining some of those details. And but you have to know what you're doing. If you have a lot of details, maybe go for a finer ground. If it's a print with a lot of long gradations, maybe you want to go with a coarser rocker. So you have to know what your tools can do, what the process can do, and how to use the materials.
Yeah. And it sounds like you also need to, kind of what you were talking about with the writers, I imagine you need to have a clear idea of what you're going for when you get in there.
Yeah, but no, there's often surprises. It's like, okay, when I did the print Estampede, which is an old cast iron fire engine, I had originally bought that as a gift for Philip Persing because he collects those. And then I said, he's got enough of them, I'm going to keep this one. And so it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do with it. And then in September of 2001, in August of 2001, I got the idea. I started rocking the plate. September 10th, I started to engrave the plate. I again, it was one of those instances where I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I had no patience for the sketch. So I worked directly on the plate. But the very next day, after I started, scraping and burnishing the image, 9/11 happened, and I was living in Brooklyn. And all you would hear, I lost all, phone service, I lost TV, radio, I got CBS, that was it, because they broadcast from the Empire State Building instead of the World Trade Center. And so all you heard was the sound of military planes ripping overhead, and sirens like wolves in the distance, like, out of Dr. Zhivago or something. And so while working on that plate, it became this frenetic, almost spooky image, when it was supposed to be this fun toy. And so it was the kind of thing where it just seeped in through osmosis. What I was feeling crept into that plate that, I started, as 9/11 was happening. So there are surprises. It's like I had an idea, but it came out a whole lot different. So
Yeah. Here's a great question. You make such wonderful images, evolutions of wonderful image evolutions of old complex machinery. Do you find current technological objects equally stimulating, or of imagined form creation? Are you gonna do an iPhone anytime soon? You gonna?
I have an iPhone 7. So that is an antique. But I have done some images in my drawings and mixed media work where I have like an old computer that is sort of facing off with a typewriter. Or like I found a monitor of a computer, took off the plastic, and inside was all these wires and, a tube and everything like that. I did an oil painting of that. So modern technology, if I can find the hook, does interest me. I had one of those iMacs on with the screen that moved on, looked like half a volleyball. And when that thing went kaput, I took out the motherboard. And it's beautiful. It's round, and it's got all these green and shapes and circuits and all this stuff. And it's hanging on my wall in my staircase as art.
As a little ready-made motherboard.
Yes, it's beautiful. And so yeah, I do find beauty when I first got a couple of years ago, when I got my the first M1 chip iMac. It was just, didn't want to touch it. I just wanted to look at it. Oh my, it's like, what a beautiful machine, so I do appreciate modern machinery. I do. And cars. I mean, I love classic cars, and a well-designed car. I'm not big on cars, like, for driving, but
Right.
just to look at the design and how people made them and what their thoughts were, an old Bugatti or something. Oh my God, I love it. Very Art Deco stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a way that I think the general public interface with design in a way that maybe isn't as conscious. People know what their phone feels like and looks like, and they know what their television or their computer feels like and looks like. And so what I see in your work is an opportunity for people to tune their attention to the design and beauty and artistry of the extraordinary objects that they surround themselves with.
Yeah, I mean, and again, these were extensions of the body. They were meant to do things that we couldn't do. Like with Charlie Chaplin, modern times, and he's, becomes the machine almost, as he's
Right.
away the thing. But every part is designed so beautifully. In my print timelines, which is of an old clock, you were never supposed to see the insides of it, but it's so Victorian. It's so the filigree and everything. And why? It was not supposed to be seen. For what purpose did they make the inside so beautiful? And I understand how these objects work. When my computer breaks, oh my God, Apple must think, they must have some kind of like, well, don't pick up the phone, it's her, because I just freak out. And it's like, but with the typewriter, okay, this broke, I can fix it, so
Mm.
I like that about it. They're understandable to me.
Yeah. Well, we are coming back around to the top of the hour. That flew by. I just want to thank you so much. We are definitely getting more affirmations in the chat. Jacob Crook says he finds rocking plates very therapeutic and meditative.
Yeah, but have you seen his work?
I
Oh
have not.
my
I have.
God, he's amazing. He's one of these young guys coming up doing mezzotints, taking it to another level. His work is fabulous. You should be carrying his work.
Oh, well, that is Jacob. That's an endorsement.
Yes.
That is an endorsement. Well, thank you. Carol, anything else to say, Richard?
So I just want to thank both, first of all, Carol Wax for an absolutely fascinating and illuminating talk on your wonderful work, and for Alex for facilitating this, because it truly was a very, very enjoyable talk. And I thank all of you who are listening. And I just want to remind you that the exhibition is up in our gallery until May 24th, and you can view it on our website as well. Thank you again, Carol, so much.
Well,
And
thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to express my craziness. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
We'll see you around.